And okay. Welcome to another episode of Rare Connection, where we delve into the stories, struggles, and triumphs of those navigating both insightful and inspiring. Promise to be both insightful and inspiring. But before we dive into a quick note, listen to our listeners. Rare Connection is now monetized and on the audio only version of the podcast. So you may hear some ads throughout the episode. Your support through these ads enables us to continue our mission of connecting, educating, and advocating for those with rare diseases. Before we begin, I want to remind our listeners that this podcast is for educational purposes only. Always seek medical advice from a qualified healthcare professional before implementing anything discussed in this podcast. Today, I'm honored to introduce our guest, Sky, a rare disease parent advocate who, hailing from Oklahoma. Sky's journey into advocacy started with her daughter, Presley, who was diagnosed with Malan Syndrome in 2021 after a arduous 8.5 year diagnostic odyssey. Sky's dedication to raising awareness and supporting families facing rare diseases knows no bounds. So she co-founded the Oklahoma Rare Coalition, serves on the advisory board of the Malan Syndrome Foundation, and is actively involved in organizations like A Twist of Fate, ATS, offering support to those for those affected with arterial tortuosity syndrome and their loved ones. In addition to her advocacy work, Sky lends her expertise to numerous state and local community boards and coalitions, ensuring that the voice of the rare disease community is heard far and wide. Today, Sky will share her family's journey and challenges they faced, and the hope they found along the way. Join us as we explore the power of connection, the importance of education, and the quest for treatment through clinical trials. And for our audio only listeners, remember you can always reach out to me directly via the link provided in the show notes. If you're watching this, if you're watching the live video version, you can comment in the live chat or below after the podcast has ended. Your feedback, questions, and stories are always welcome. So without further ado, let's dive into this week's episode of Rare Connection with Sky. Okay, so can you give us a brief definition of, or in layman's terms, what Malan syndrome is?
Sure. Well, thank you for the intro. It was really kind, and I'm so glad to be here today. So Malan syndrome, you'll find it is pronounced a couple of different ways. Typically, the community says Malan,
Mhm.
and the Malan syndrome or Malan syndrome is a variant on the NF1X gene. It is a syndrome that affects many systems in the bodies. There are a lot of characteristics associated with Malan syndrome, such as intellectual disability. There are skeletal anomalies, seizures, anxiety. We are. It seems like we're finding out every day some new symptoms. Right now, there are about 300 people diagnosed in the world, and our daughter is one of about 80 to 90 diagnosed in the US.
Okay. We do have some viewers today. So one of them says they like your classes.
Oh, thank you.
So, and let's see. Could you start by telling could you start by telling us about your family's journey with Presley, with Presley's diagnosis of Malan syndrome? What are
Sure.
Okay? Oh, another question. What are the path? Oh, let's see. What was the path like finding and receiving the diagnosis after the 8.5 year no, for after the 8.5 years?
Sure. So Presley was born in 2012. She's our youngest of three daughters. I had a non complicated pregnancy and birth. At about 6 months old, she began to stop babbling. At about 9 months old, she was not meeting milestones. She received an intellectual disability diagnosis right before three when she went into the public school system. And at that time, that was her only diagnosis. So when Presley was about 3 years old, I had a friend who had just started a Twist of Fate ATS. It's a nonprofit. Her son is diagnosed with arterial tortuosity syndrome. She asked us if we had considered genetic testing, and we hadn't at the time. So when she was about five, we started some one-off genetic tests. They tested her for things like Fragile X. So between 5 and 7, we did probably 10 one-off genetic tests through private insurance. Uh, and at about 8, she had a new pediatrician who suggested we do whole exome screening. And at that point, they found that she had a variant on the NF1X gene. And so she was about 8.5 when she got her diagnosis in 2021.
Okay. Let's see. Have you? See. How did that come about? How did she get her diagnosis?
We did the whole exome screening. It took about 3 months after that. Our doctor called and said they had found results and a genetic counselor would be reaching out. The genetic counselor called us and let us know that they did find something and it was on the NF1X gene. It was about a week later we got in with genetics and they let us know it was likely associated with Malan syndrome. There are a couple of things that it could be on that NF1X gene, but they thought that her characteristics aligned very well with Malan syndrome. So, of course, we went home like all parents, many parents probably do, and went to Google. We were really lucky. As soon as we Googled it, the Malan Syndrome Foundation came up, and that was the start of really finding our community.
Okay. So one of our viewers wants to know, what is Fragile X?
Fragile X is another, it is a rare disease on another gene with another variant. I don't have a lot of details about that. I know at the time our doctor thought that some of our daughter's symptoms and characteristics aligned with it, but it turns out they did not.
Okay. Let's see. How did you test for? How did you and your family cope with the uncertainty challenges during the diagnostic journey?
That was a hard time. We Initially, we got her intellectual disability diagnosis, and our goal at that time was just to get her the supports that she needs to live an independent life and do all of the things that at the time 3-year-olds were doing. So we set her up with a lot of supports. When we started to look for a diagnosis, um, after the first few where they couldn't find anything, we kind of thought maybe we would not have a diagnosis because, as we know, there are a lot of undiagnosed rare diseases, and that it was possible we would not have any answers. We were mostly looking for answers for insurance purposes. It can be hard to get treatments and care that you need if you don't have a diagnosis. So we had really been at peace with the idea we might not find a diagnosis. So we were just setting up her with supports and with everything that she needed. And once we got the diagnosis, it was really nice to have those answers. We found out a lot of things. Our daughter should have been seeing cardiology from a very young age, and she didn't see the cardiologist until she was 9. So those kind of the medical part of it, the diagnosis gave us a lot of answers and treatments that we needed to seek out for her.
So yeah, what inspired you to co-found the Oklahoma Rare Coalition? Could you share some of the key initiatives and goals of the coalition?
Sure. We There is a large, rare community here in Oklahoma, but we oftentimes find that we're not really connected. So our goal, I started Oklahoma Rare with another parent who is not only the parent of a son with a rare disease, but she is also diagnosed with the same rare disease. And we started it to just kind of start to build connections and share resources, and that has really been the initiative, and that's how it's remained over the past, I guess, few years now, is just that community building and sharing of resources.
Mhm. Um, can you tell us more about your role on the Malan Syndrome Foundation, Parent Advisory Board, and a Twisted Fate ATS? What were the main objectives of these organizations?
So both organizations are patient organizations that support patients who are diagnosed with both of those conditions, or either of those conditions. So in 2015, like I said, my friend asked, she needed some help with a Twisted Fate ATS and was looking for board members. And I joined in 2015, which turned out to be really life changing for us because I had a lot of connections in the rare kind of community when we actually got our daughter's diagnosis, which was a totally different diagnosis. Um, so, A Twist of Fate has been doing great work since 2015, and I still serve on the board proudly. And we're working on a large PCORI funded grant connecting rare diseases with connected are also connective tissue disorders. So we're wrapping up that 2-year grant. And in 2023, the Malan Syndrome Foundation asked me to serve on the Parent Advisory Board, which I proudly do. So I help facilitate our monthly parent social connection Zooms, where parents of children with Malan Syndrome connect via Zoom monthly.
Um, what kind of support and resources have you found most helpful?
I would say, over the years, the kind of support that we have found to be most helpful, really has been our community. I feel really strongly that patient communities are a form of treatment for both patients and their families. So having those supports have been invaluable to us. Having people who get it, who can answer questions, who can just be community with us. That has been the biggest support. But along the way, also, there are times when if we get financial supports in some way, either with equipment. That has been really helpful. If we found any specific grants, those have been really helpful to us as well.
Mhm. How has being part of these organizations and coalitions impacted your family?
I would say the biggest way is just, and I'll probably say the same word over and over again, connection. It is so important to be connected with communities, connected with individuals. That has impacted our family in a very, very positive way. Is just having those connections. And also, we're big believers that service to others is the best way that you live intentionally. So, serving on these boards and giving back to families things that have been given to us is really important to our family. So, those are just a couple of ways that it impacts us.
Uh, what are some of the biggest challenges you faced um, as a rare parent advocate, uh, and how have you overcome them?
I think that one of the biggest challenges that we've had as advocates is when you say the word rare, oftentimes policymakers or whoever you may be working with, it kind of closes us down a little bit. That rare means few. So getting the point across to policymakers that rare does not mean few. When we talk about Oklahoma, there are approximately 395,000 Oklahomans diagnosed with rare diseases. That's not a small number. But sometimes when you say rare to them, it kind of closes them off that this is a small subset of people to support. So getting that across when we are advocating is a big goal of ours.
Mhm. Yes, there are over 10,000 rare conditions for those. So likely, pretty much everybody knows somebody with one of them,
Yep.
if not multiple. So, what are your hopes and for the future in terms of research, treatments, and support for rare diseases in the like Malan syndrome?
I think, from a personal perspective, our biggest goal is to have treatments for symptoms. I would love to, have those treatments for the symptoms that our daughter gets. The fatigue, the overheating, those kind of symptoms. So that's my biggest goal is just to continue the research. There are only 300 diagnosed right now. So that research is growing. The Malan Syndrome Foundation does a great job with research and has an amazing chief research scientist on the board. They do a great job with that. So I would just love to see the research continue to grow. They are good about bringing families in to do research projects, which we've participated in. So those are really goals, just to see the research thrive, to see treatments, whether those are new treatments or repurposed drugs or treatments for our kids.
See, in your opinion, what are the most pressing issues that need to be addressed to improve the lives of those with Malan syndrome?
For families, so from my perspective, I would say it is support such as financial and respite. Those things are really challenges that we have in our person, from our personal experience. For patients, there are, so many barriers to getting treatments and care, whether it's not being able to see a specialist out of state. Oklahoma is losing a lot of specialists at an alarming rate. So when we have patients on Medicaid, sometimes it can be hard to see specialists out of state or to do telehealth visits. So I just think the access to care and treatments is just a big priority right now for patients with rare diseases.
Uh, um, what are see how can medical professionals and the general public better support Malan syndrome patients and their families?
I was lucky enough to participate in the Global Genes Rare Compassion Program, which kind of partners rare patients or their caregivers with medical students. And I would say the one thing that I said the most to them was to listen to patients, to listen what their symptoms are, to consider their perspective and consider them a valuable part of the team. And when we're talking about minors, to listen to their caregivers as well and their families. So medical professionals could really help us by listening and taking our perspective seriously.
What steps can individuals take to raise awareness and advocate for more research and resources for rare diseases?
There are a lot of ways, whether you're advocating locally or more at a federal level. There's some great organizations like the Every Life Foundation. They have some amazing programs. So our daughter right now is doing their Rare Youth and Teen Advocacy Day, where she'll be meeting with federal legislators on the 18th of this month to advocate for rare disease policies. Um, yeah, and that's kind of at a top tier level. But there's also a lot of ways locally. We do a lot of advocating in our local school district. We do just raising awareness about rare diseases and complex medical needs within our own school districts, within our own communities. So there are a lot of ways, and there are a lot of organizations like NORD and the Every Life Foundation that are facilitating a lot of advocacy opportunities.
Uh, what are your hopes for the future in terms of research, treatments, and support for rare diseases like Malan syndrome?
I just really want to see the research grow. Research is really expensive. When you talk about the patient organizations, they are usually run by people who are affected by the rare disease or caregivers. And it can be hard to get funding to do research. So I would just love to see more federal money coming into research for rare diseases, as well as just seeing that research grow.
Uh, see, what advice would you give to other parents and families who are just starting their journey with rare diseases, with a rare disease diagnosis?
I would say to find your community, and that's not always possible within a rare disease, but there's a large rare disease community at large. Online, there is, just making those connections. That is my best advice. Um, just to also build those relationships with policymakers, whether it's your local school board or whether it's your, senator at the federal level. Building those relationships really i- lets you have those conversations, and really talk about the issues and be taken seriously. So cultivating those relationships and finding your community as well.
How has your journey with Presley and your advocacy work changed your perspective on life and community?
I think the biggest way advocacy, so I'm a seasoned advocate. I'm the daughter of a mother with disabilities. I've spent a lot of time advocating over my life. But I think the way that it has changed us is finding our power and finding our voice. It is very empowering to do that. And also I think what we found as far as the community, whether, like I said, we're talking about our local school board, or there are a lot of people who have good intentions. They might just need a little more information. If you can provide them that information, and they don't know what they don't know, so just always being prepared to share your story, to share your journey, and to share what's passionate.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners about your journey and your work and your work with or the rare disease community?
I would say, we see a lot of people with the long diagnostic journey. For us, what was important was having the same goals for our daughter as we had for all of our children, was that she live an independent life full of choice and surrounded by people she cares about and that care about her. She needs supports to be able to do that. Um, but that's always been our main goal. So if you're looking for a diagnosis, there are still ways to support yourself or support your children and to find kind of the support around you to do that. Also, I think, my other advice is just, like I said, was just to find your community. It can be really isolating when you are raising children with disabilities, or sometimes as a rare disease patient, you can find yourself being a little isolated. So finding your community if possible. So that's a big reason why we created the Oklahoma Rare Coalition and page, was just to build that community and those connections.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Rare Connection. It has been our honor to have to hear from Sky Collins.
Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to it next time when we can get together again.
Mm-hmm. And let's see, to learn about her incredible journey and advocacy work, dedication and to the rare disease community is truly inspiring. You can find out more about Malan Syndrome by going to malansyndrome.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe to our channel, Rare Chef, on YouTube. On Rare Chef, you can also find you can not only find our podcast, but you can also you can find both our podcast episodes and many cooking videos where I share exciting recipes and culinary tips. By subscribing, you'll stay updated with all our latest content. For those who feel moved to support our mission, you can make a donation at https://www.buzzsprout.com 220443 /support. Your contributions help us continue to connect rare disease patients, educate the public, and advocate for crucial research and treatment development. We also want to make it easier for you to comment on with us. There is now a Facebook group and also a Facebook page. Before we go, I want to remind you that mental health is incredibly important. If you were someone you know is struggling, please reach out to please reach out for help. In the U.S., you can call 988 for the Suicide Crisis Lifeline, or text help to 741-741. To reach the crisis lifeline. For more resources, visit the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline website at suicidepreventionlifeline.org. Thank you again for tuning in. Stay connected, stay informed, and take care of each other. Until next time, this is Joanna signing off for Reconnection.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you.